last?
Oh, well, you asked what would good journalism look like. I mean, I'm going to sound very arse-licky here, but I would say Channel 4 News and Newsnight. I mean, that's what probably, people here regard as the ideal outcome. But I think, what Anatole said about the time service is quite interesting. If you read newspapers back in the 60s and see what they covered, how they covered the Congo conflict, Patrice Lumumba and the UN deploying in Congo, and then you go back even further, which I've done from my books, and read 1930s coverage of Abyssinia. It's very curious the level of detail that British journalists thought was relevant and important to a British audience. And you do slightly wonder why they thought that. And I do think the danger of surveys is that they self-reinforce. And so, they find that people aren't as interested in the foreign news as in Jade Goody, so we respond to that. And then there's less of it, so nobody's interested, nobody reads it, so nobody knows where these places are, so they're less interested. And it's a kind of spiral. And it seems to me that there is an element of kind of pedantic, we should be pedants actually on newspapers. We should be saying it's good for you. Eat your porridge. You've got to know where these places are. You've got to know why Burundi matters or doesn't. We should be more braver about that, because otherwise we're just reinforcing people's. We need to be told why these things matter, and newspapers and newspaper editors have to take that pedantic role on again, which they seem to, they're responding just to the polls and surveys, and it's a bit pathetic actually.
It's pretty simple. I was in a morgue in 2004, and 100 people had been killed in a suicide bombing in Iraq, and I was with a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, who's a photographer, and we were going through the morgue looking at some pretty dreadful stuff, and it was so dreadful that none of the pictures we took would ever make any newspaper, certainly not his newspaper. And I said to him one day, I said to him that day, why are you doing this? And he just said, because it's record. That's it. And it was a reminder to me that it's not about ego, it's not about what I think, but a lot of the time what you do working in failed states is about witnessing stuff, and it's about witnessing stuff in an absolutely cool and neutral sense, no matter how unpleasant it is to you, and trying to tell stories that you come across. And I've never had any big agenda in anything that I've done, but just simply to see seems to me to be the most important thing that we can do, and it's what David says about shining a light.
Just the hymn of praise to BBC World Service Language Services.
Yes.
Just to endorse that, from my own experience travelling a variety of places, they weigh their audience in West Africa and India still. Tens of millions of people still listening on shortwave in the middle of nowhere. It's their only communication with the outside world. When I first started travelling with the Taliban in the mid-90s, it was because I was travelling with the Pashtun service reporter from the Northwest Frontier, who in every village we went to was bigger than Elvis Presley. And it's when I really realised it. And the Taliban hated television and never allowed me to do any proper interviews. And Rahimullah would say, "Okay, you can film now," and we would manage to make television in that kind of way. And when they're in the field, they were happy to be filmed. But they saw me as just a sort of comic adjunct to the main man, who was the Pashtun service. So that was clearly the real BBC. John's point about sort of atomized media and it's only a tiny group of people reading books who are getting this. I mean, there is a problem in thinking it's all over for network news and big newspapers. But I'm an optimist about journalism. I think, as Paul says, there's loads of blogs out there, and a lot of them are written by very good journalists. Just because 12 million people aren't watching the 10 o'clock news as they were when I started at the BBC more than 20 years ago, that if you get 3 million on a good night, they're feeling proud of it.
Five.
Sorry, five.
On a good night.
Quite a lot.
On a good night. Well, it is quite a lot. It is quite a lot. But it's going down very fast over the...
No, it's not actually.
Historically.
It's held steady for the last 3 years.
Historically. Over 25 years. Over 25 years, it's quarter of what it was.
10 years ago, it was 8 million. Now it's 5 million, and it's stayed
That's
like
down.
that for more than
But you could both be right, which is that this is still a
It's an
huge
important
audience.
point. This is where the mass audience still is.
Yeah, there is still a mass audience watching Central News, and which is highly well served by Fran's fantastic team of BBC reporters. But there is, I'm not gloomy about it. Out there in this atomised market, there are lots of people reading quite serious things. And, comment is free. I mean, there's a huge amount of really good material online, and meetings like this right across London. And just to finish on Jeremy's point, Jeremy's heartfelt, honest. I went there. Were we trying to help? I think we can question whether we're failing the failed states, but actually I don't think our task is helping as journalists. I think we're just reporting what's going on in the world, and people can make up their own minds about it. And if you try and do anything else, then you end up with sort of rubbish like peace journalism. You end up in a sort of in a prescriptive, agenda-based world of, where you don't have an honest relationship with your audience. And I won't to finish with quote George Orwell, but one slightly down the tree, Tom Stoppard in his play Night is Day, where he has the long-standing, embittered war photographer saying just exactly what Jeremy was saying earlier on. This is Tom Stoppard writing in about 1970. People do awful things to each other. I've been around a lot of places, but it's worse in places where everybody is kept in the dark. It really is. Information is light. Information in itself about anything is light.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Have a drink. Look forward to the festival.